Welcome to the Bayes Server channel. Bayes Server is a powerful tool for building Bayesian networks and causal AI models. In today's video, we're going to be working through the Bayes Server discrete network manual construction tutorial, which is available on our Learning Centre. We will be largely following the tutorial as is. However, we will introduce tips and tricks along the way. So this is what the network we're going to build today looks like. It's also available from our start page as one of the sample networks. So if we look down here, we can open up a network called Causal Inference Simple. If we single click that, you'll see the network here. Let's make it slightly larger. And this is already built. So, for example, we have 3 nodes, we have 3 links, and each node has a distribution assigned. So a Bayesian network basically consists of nodes, links, and distributions. The distributions themselves are basically the node, or synonymous with variable in this case, given its parents. So for comorbidity, you can see that the distribution to be defined just has comorbidity in it because it has no parents. Whereas if we look at, say, recovered and come into the distribution here, you'll see that we need probability of recovered given both comorbidity and drug. So it's a little bit more complicated. So if you look at the actual tutorial, you can see that there's a number of different ways in which we can construct a network. In this tutorial, we're going to manually add the nodes, whereas alternatively, we could have added nodes from data if we had a database or a spreadsheet, etc. And then we're going to subsequently manually add links, and alternatively, you could use structural learning as an option. And then finally, we're going to manually specify the node distributions or the variable distributions. And an alternative to that, if we have a data source, is to use parameter learning. Okay, so with Bayes Server open, you can see the start page here. We're going to click New Empty Network as a starting point. And then remember, we need to add nodes, aka variables. Then we're going to add links. And then finally, we're going to specify the distributions themselves. So we're going to be mainly working from this Build tab for today. And if we go to the tutorial itself, the first thing we need to do is add a comorbidity node. So let's go and do that. So from the Build tab, we'll click Node, and then we're going to add discrete nodes today. This network's very simple, so it just has 3 discrete nodes. So we'll click Discrete. We'll change the node name to comorbidity. You can optionally provide a description in here. And then for the states, it's asking us to define 2 states, one with the name false and the other true. So let's go and do that. So let's rename this one false and call the other one true. Now in here, you can see if you hover over the little I, you'll get some help on what these different boxes mean and so on. We can add additional states here. It doesn't have to be 2 states, it could be 3, 4, 100, etc. Also, sometimes you can define a specific number or Boolean type to a node as well, which you can do from there. If you click this help button, it takes you to our standard help for editing nodes, which has a lot more information in there. So okay, so we're done with this one, so we can click OK. And you can see we've got our new node up here, comorbidity. So if we go back to our tutorial, it wants us to add 2 additional discrete nodes, but with the names drug and recovered respectively. So let's go and do that. It's exactly the same way as we did the other one. So quickly we'll add one called drug. Just move that around slightly. Let's actually make this display a little bit larger. And finally, we'll add the recovered node in here and change the state names. Now, again, if we had a data source, we could do this automatically using add nodes from data, which can be found again on the build menu node, add nodes from data. But here we're doing everything manually. Okay, so let's pop back to the tutorial. So it's asking us to reposition some of the nodes, which we've already done. So you can see that our network doesn't quite look like the one that we're finally trying to build, and that's because the chart type is currently different, and the chart type is just how we want to display the information on the screen. It doesn't actually affect the definition of the model itself. So what we can do is we can select all of these nodes. So we can go to the display menu and go select all nodes, and then we can choose node chart type clustered column. And at the moment there's no queries defined, so you won't be able to see what it looks like. But if I did briefly add a query, you can see that it looks like that. And you can see it's now starting to look like the final network. Okay, so if we go back to the tutorial, let's have a look at the next step. Okay, so predictably the next step is to add some links. So again, from the build tab, we can click link, add link. It wants us to start by choosing a link from comorbidity to the drug node. So let's go ahead and do that. There's a few different ways we can do this. We could click link, add link, and then select these nodes in here and so on. And note that you can either add them manually one by one, or if you've got one node that needs to connect to 20 others, you can do it all in one step. Another alternative is to first select the comorbidity node and then the drug node, and then click link, add link, and notice how it's automatically filled out from and to. So this is a nice shortcut. And then all we have to do is click OK. And we see we have a new link here. So if we go back to the tutorial, it wants us to repeat that from drug to recovered and comorbidity to recovered. So let's go and do that. So let's select drug first and then recovered, add link, and then comorbidity to recovered, add link. Okay, so that's great. So the network should now look something like this, which it does, which is great. So the final step for manual construction of a network is to define all the distributions for each of the nodes. Now, as we mentioned previously, in a Bayesian network, each distribution is basically the node given its parents, and we're using the term node synonymously with variable in this case. So, as I said, if we're looking to define comorbidity, we just have to know the probabilities for false and true, whereas some of the other nodes will require a conditional probability table, probability of drug given comorbidity. So if we start by defining comorbidity, again, there's a few different ways we can launch the distribution editor. We can click the distribution button here and then click edit distribution, and that will launch the distribution editor. I quite often like to hit auto fit here so you can more clearly see the different columns. And then it wants us to enter 0.51 for comorbidity equals false and 0.49 for comorbidity equals true. So notice that sums to 1. So to do that, we can come in here and type 0.51. And to enter edit mode, I'm double clicking there and then 0.49. And you'll notice if it doesn't sum to 1, if I put in something like 0.3, you'll get these error warning messages. Distribution is invalid. Each set of conditional values must sum to 1. So if I now put in 0.49, you'll see that error disappear. Now there's a few other options we can see up in the toolbar which will cover some of these when we edit some of the other nodes, but for now that looks fine, so we can OK that. And you can see now that while some of these other nodes have a little orange marker by the distribution edit button, this one is now neither orange or red. It can sometimes go red in other cases. Okay, so for the drug node, let's do that next. As an alternative to clicking distribution, edit distribution, we can do it from the node toolbar. If you hover over this, it will tell you distribution for this node has been assigned or updated automatically. Click to check. So we're going to come in here. And here we need to define the probability of drug given comorbidity. So let's have a look down here. So comorbidity, drug. So it's actually in the same order here. So you can see it's the same layout. We've got drug equals false, drug equals true, and comorbidity on the left here. So that's actually the same for the way we want to define it here. Now in your case you might have your numbers laid out slightly differently, so we can do things like drag columns around to reorder, or an important option here is the thing we call a V order. So if we wanted to have drug first and then comorbidity, we can reorder these. And now we'll auto fit again, and now you can see the way we're editing the distribution has changed. So some people lay it out one way or another, but in here you've got complete flexibility to change that to match your input format. So we're going to go back to the same order as in the tutorial. And now I'm actually going to copy these values in here. So we're going to go in here, copy these two, copy. Now I'm going to select these two cells and click paste, just to make things a little bit quicker. And I'll do the same thing here for this one here. Okay, so let's just quickly check that looks right. Yep, that looks good. So we're going to OK that. And then finally for the recovered node, now it's even more complicated. We need the probability of recovered given both comorbidity and drug. So this is another example of a conditional probability distribution. Again, we could, if we wanted to, adjust the V order, but now we've got three different things to reorder to match whatever format you might have. So let's check this matches the tutorial first. We've got comorbidity, then drug, then recovered. Let's look at the table in here. It happens to be the same because we added it as per the tutorial, but in your case you might want to rearrange things. So these are quite simple numbers, so we'll just go and edit these manually. So 0.13 and 0.87. Okay, that looks good. So let's OK that. The other thing to point out at this point is if you do make a mistake, there is a undo and redo option here. So, if you move something or you edit something incorrectly, add the wrong link or whatever, you can go back. And another option as well is to use one of our APIs. So you could do everything we've done today using the API. In fact, the user interface itself uses the API under the hood. You could codify this in a variety of different languages, save the network out, and then if you wanted to, open it in the UI. Also, you could save this from the UI and open it from within the API as well. That's another option. So at this point, the Bayesian network should be fully specified and ready to be queried. So we're not in this tutorial going to cover querying in any depth, but we'll quickly add a few just to demonstrate that the network is working as expected, and hopefully we've specified it correctly. So from the query tab, we're going to click add all nodes. So here, query, add all nodes. And you can see what it's done is it's added a default query for each node. There's another way you can do this as well. There's a little button here. This will remove the query and then it'll turn into a plus, and if you click the plus, it'll add the query. But in this case, we're just going to query every node. There are some specialist cases where you might have a very complicated network and you only want to query a subset of the nodes for performance reasons. But in this case, it's so simple, we don't need to worry about that. Okay, so let's check our values here and just make sure it looks sensible. So 51 and 49, that looks good. 50-50 for drug, and 19.6 for recovered. So it's looking good. Now let's set some evidence. Let's set recovered equals to false and just check it's behaving as we expect. So what we're expecting is 30.1 and 69.9, 30.1, 69.9, 43.7 and 56.3. So that all looks good. I should point out that for this video we've used dark mode, which is just the one I tend to use, but you can go into the start page and click dark theme off, and then it will go to the light theme, which is what the tutorial currently looks like, but that could change in the future. Okay, so that wraps up this tutorial. Thanks very much for watching, and do subscribe and like this video if you want to see more. Thanks again.